Hey future York students!
I'm Sidel.
And I'm Neetha.
And welcome to the Faculty of Liberal Arts and Professional Studies Program Chat Series.
We want you to know that here in LA&PS, you will study what you love and learn what you need.
In this chat, you'll be hearing from future professors as well as current students about the program.
What it has to offer you, like internship opportunities.
And what your first year in the program may look like.
Alright, should we get started?
Yeah, let's get started.
Enjoy, everybody.
Hi, everyone. Welcome to our program chat series. Today, we're going to be talking about a very interesting program, Cognitive Science. My name is Adam Duncan. I'm the Recruitment and Liaison Officer for the Faculty of Liberal Arts and Professional Studies, and I'll be hosting our exploration of this topic. So while this meeting is virtual, and because of that, we are not all actually gathered on the same space, York's land acknowledgement might not represent the territory that you are currently on. And I would ask that if this is the case, that you each take the responsibility to acknowledge the traditional territory that you are currently on and its current treaty holders. As members of the York University community, we recognize that many Indigenous nations have long-standing relationships with the territories upon which York University campuses are located that precede the establishment of York University. York University acknowledges its presence on the traditional territory of many Indigenous nations. The area known as Takaranto has been taken care of by the Anishinaabeg Nation, the Haudenosaunee Confederacy, the Huron-Wendat, and the Métis. It is now home to many Indigenous peoples. We acknowledge the current treaty holders, the Mississaugas of the Credit First Nation. This territory is subject of the Dish with One Spoon Wampum Belt Covenant, an agreement to peaceably share and care for the Great Lakes region. Now I'd like to introduce our guest this morning, Professor Jacob Beck, who is a professor within our Cognitive Science program, who's going to talk a little bit about what the Cognitive Science program is like here at York University. Good morning, Professor Beck.
Good morning. Thanks, Adam. So I'm looking forward to sharing some information about the Cognitive Science program with everyone. And I'm going to start a slideshow that will help me present the material right now. Hi, so here's some information about the Cognitive Science program at York. So I'll start off by telling you what cognitive science is in general. Then I'll tell you what the program is at York, why it involves so many disciplines, what kinds of courses we offer, and what you might do with the major. Okay, so what is cognitive science? So cognitive science is an interdisciplinary study of the mind with input from a variety of disciplines, including psychology, linguistics, computer science, neuroscience, anthropology, education, and my home department of philosophy. So the cognitive science program at York doesn't involve all of those programs, but it involves, it's housed in the Department of Philosophy, and it has participation from 4 other programs. That's psychology, linguistics, computer science, and information technology. The program also capitalizes on other resources at York, such as the Center for Vision Research. Okay, so you might wonder, why are there so many disciplines involved in cognitive science? And the answer is that many questions about the mind can only be answered collaboratively using a variety of methods. Right, so the idea is that the mind is just too complex to be fully understood by any one discipline. And so we need this joint effort from a variety of different disciplines to help understand the mind. So some questions that we look at in cognitive science and that you'll study if you become a cognitive science major include, is morality innate or acquired, right? So we all have a sense of right and wrong. Is that something that we have innately, that we're born with? Or is it just something that our parents and our communities instill in us? How do children learn new concepts? Right, so you show a child a banana, you point at it and say, that's a banana. And then maybe the child says banana. And then at another context, the child sees a banana and it knows that it's a banana. How does the child do that if it doesn't already have the concept banana to know what you're picking out when you point to a banana? How are new concepts learned? Do speakers of different languages think differently? So suppose your language has different color words, words for shades of blue, maybe that my language doesn't have. Does that mean that you'll think differently about those colors? Will you perceive the colors differently? Or is language just a sort of medium for communicating, but without altering perception or thought? Do we think in words? Do you think in images, right? Kind of like mental pictures? Do you use both words and images to think, or neither? How can we tell? As a cognitive science major, you would study that, and you'll find that there are actually very interesting methods you can use to try to discover what the format or structure of people's thoughts are like. How do emotions influence reasoning? Right, so are emotions something that's totally separate and dichotomous with reasoning, or do we actually think with our emotions and through our emotions? Or is emotional thinking a kind of a specific type of thinking? How should we understand that? Are computers intelligent? So right now, computers can do pretty amazing things. You can use Google Translate to tell you what a block of text says in a language that you can't understand. Does that mean that the computer is intelligent? So maybe you don't think that your laptop is intelligent, but could it be? Could we build an intelligent robot? What would be required to do that? Those questions are absolutely central to cognitive science, and they're really central. This whole idea that the mind is a kind of computer is central to cognitive science. Can we tell if people are lying by looking at their brains? More generally, how does someone's brain relate to their mind? Can you just read off thoughts and perceptions from the brain? Or is the brain somehow different? And does thinking involve more than just your brain? What about psychopaths? Are they evil, or are they just sick? So the picture there is of a famous case of Phineas Gage, who had an iron rod, which he used for tamping down railroad tracks in the 19th century. And it went up through his brain. And amazingly, he survived, but he was fundamentally changed. And he became a very different person and would sometimes fly off into a rage. And he just didn't seem like the same person. So is that because what all it is to be a psychopath is just to be someone with some sort of brain damage, maybe not necessarily an iron rod through your head, but some a kind of mental illness? Or could there really be such a thing as evil? What about cute non-human animals? Are they conscious? Is it something it's like to be an animal? What about, so maybe for some animals like lemurs and monkeys that they're conscious, but what about dogs, or what about ants? Are ants conscious? What about a paramecium? Would a paramecium be conscious? Where do you draw that line between animals for whom there is a conscious mental life and those for whom there isn't? Okay, so that's cognitive science. As you can see, these are difficult questions, and we find that the best way to answer them is to draw on the resources of a number of different disciplines. So what kind of courses do we offer at York? Well, we offer a broad range of courses from various disciplines that can satisfy the degree requirements. So one of the sort of beginning main courses, a kind of introduction to cognitive science, is called Minds, Brains, and Machines. So that's a course that all cognitive science majors are required to take. Another required course is cognition, that's offered through the psychology department. And that would give you an introduction to essentially how we model thought and reasoning. Language and the mind is offered through the linguistics department. And that's also a required course for all cognitive science majors. And it tells you a little bit about how language works and how humans are able to learn languages. And then there are some optional courses. So one optional course is developmental psychology. So that tells you how babies change, how they acquire new concepts, how they come to think more and more like adults, and how that whole process works. Memory is another optional course, which tells you how memory works and how some people can lose some types of memory but maintain others. Animal behavior is also an optional course, so you can study animals and learn about you learn about animals and how they navigate their environments, and how different animals have different ways of navigating their environments and different sort of mental capacities. The evolution of language is a further course. Again, that's optional. How languages change over time. The philosophy of artificial intelligence. So this tells you about what it means to say that the mind is a kind of computer, and whether we can create computers that can think. So those are just a small sample of the courses that we offer. If you if you look at the cognitive science degree, you can see the full list of courses that are offered. Okay, so what do you do after you get a cognitive science degree? What kinds of career paths are open to cognitive science graduates? Well, like many other majors, cognitive science doesn't train you for a specific job, right? It's not an apprenticeship. But what it does do is it prepares you for a wide range of careers. And we've had students do a ton of different things, including neuroscience, human-computer interaction, speech pathology, law, education, public policy, business, advertising, journalism, medicine. So it really trains you to think and reason clearly. And depending on what you specialize in, whether you go more into the computer science end of things, or the psychology end of things, or the linguistics or philosophy, you get slightly different specializations. And so that will alter. You can kind of tailor the degree to your own specific interests in that way, and in that way tailor your preparedness for various careers. But all of these fields require knowledge of how the mind works, and so cognitive science is a good degree for all of these fields. Okay, so that concludes my presentation. And Adam, if you had any questions for me, I'd be happy to answer them.
Well, thanks very much. That was a fantastic presentation. And I do have a couple questions.
Shall I stop sharing my screen?
Yes, that would be great.
There we go.
Perfect.
Okay.
So one of the questions I have is about how the field is developed. It's a fairly new field of study, but maybe you could talk a little bit about how it's developed recently and how it's changed.
Yeah, that's a great question. So, when cognitive science started out, the sort of paradigm, the sort of paradigm skills that it was able to explain were things like playing chess. Things that were very rule governed. And so we had like a really good understanding, and we could build machines that would play chess, and maybe that would beat, Garry Kasparov at chess. But it was really hard to get machines to do things like really simple things like perceiving. The things that are easiest for us were the hardest to get the machines to do, right? So for you, like walking across the room and avoiding obstacles is super easy. To get a machine to do that is incredibly hard. Or to hear language and understand what's being said, super easy for you, right? 5-year-olds can do that. Really hard to get a machine to do that. Chess, math, logic, really hard for you. Those were the things we could get machines to do. So it was sort of, it was sort of weird in that way. Recently, over the last 10 years, there's been a development that you may have heard of called deep learning. And deep learning is a technique in artificial intelligence in which you feed, you feed a neural net a whole bunch of data. So you give it lots and lots of data. And instead of trying to program it with specific rules, you just let it learn for itself. And so it gets very general learning algorithms. And with all this data, it can kind of figure out which parameters it needs to tweak. And through that, we've gotten some amazing things over the last, I'd say 10 years or so. So now when you call up and you get a call center and they say, tell us what you want to talk about, it can actually understand what you're saying. We have dictation software that actually works. You can use Google Translate and it gives you a fairly decent, not a perfect, but a fairly decent translation. Like 10 years ago, none of that stuff worked. It was just, very frustrating. And that's because of deep learning. So I'd say that's been one of the big changes in the field. And so one thing you would do as a cognitive science major is sort of see how that's going and get some understanding of what's happening there.
That's really fascinating areas of interest. Now, another area you mentioned, there's a lot of different disciplines that combine together. So there are going to be some students who are interested in cognition from a psychology standpoint. What differs our psychology program from our cognitive science program?
Right. So that's a good question. There is some overlap between psychology and cognitive science, but I'd say there's two main differences. So the first is that cognitive science is proudly interdisciplinary. So as you notice, psychology is one of the main disciplines that participates in cognitive science at York, but there's also philosophy and linguistics and computer science, right? Where you can take computer science courses either from the computer science department or from information technology. So those are the disciplines that help to make up cognitive science. So it's much more interdisciplinary than just psychology. The second main difference, I would say, is this governing idea or metaphor that the mind is a kind of computer. And there are different ways of taking that. So some people take it very literally. And they think, no, the mind, it's a computer. It's even digital, just like the computers that you use at home. Other people think it's more metaphorical. Maybe it's a computer in some sense, but it's not the same sense that digital computers are computers. But still, that is a central idea in cognitive science, where for psychology, there are some psychologists who think that way, but it's not really central to psychology per se.
So do you have professors who look at both sort of ranges on the spectrum? Like, what are some of the areas of interest in research that the faculty members in cognitive science have?
Yeah, so there's a wide range of interests. And right, so if you look at the faculty list, you're going to find people from philosophy, from psychology, from linguistics, from computer science, right? And so some people are more into building machines that can do things. Other people are more into understanding the human brain and how it works, right? Cognitive neuroscientists, we have some of those on our faculty. Other people are philosophers, and so they look at some of the long-standing questions. So I'm a philosopher. And so we look at some of the long-standing questions like, what is consciousness? Or how is it possible for the mind, which is like, this 3 pounds of tofu-like consistency, how is it possible for something like that to represent the world outside of itself, right? I mean, rocks don't represent the world, trees don't represent the world. So how does this 3 pounds of jelly represent the world? And we look at the latest findings in cognitive science and try to rethink these old philosophical problems that have motivated humanity for so long and see where we're making progress, where we're still butting our heads up against the wall. The linguists, of course, specialize in language. And so they look at questions like, what is the structure of language, of sentences? And how can we learn language? How is it possible for humans to even do that? And so there's a huge variety of topics that cognitive scientists investigate. And what I would say joins them all together is just an interest in the mind and how the mind works. One specialization that's maybe worth drawing attention to is vision. So York has a very strong vision science program. We have the Center for Vision Research. We have the VISTA program, Vision Science to Applications. So that's one specialization that unifies a number of researchers, but that's still only a minority of our researchers because our researchers do so many different things.
Excellent. And so for students, they're always looking to, especially students who are going into cognitive science, they tend to be really eager to get started in the study in the field. They're always asking for things they might read to prep themselves for the first year in cognitive science. Do you have any recommendations for books that an interested student or even a parent might read to find out a little bit more information?
Yeah, so I'll give you two recommendations. Or maybe three if you want. Well, I'll start with two. So the textbook I use when I teach Minds, Brains, and Machines, which is an introduction to cognitive science, is called Cognitive Science: An Introduction to the Science of the Mind. And it's by José Luis Bermúdez. So it's on like the third edition now. I recommend the third edition because it has some more recent stuff that's occurred on like deep learning, for example, like we talked about earlier, that's not in the earlier versions. But if you just want an introduction, you just want to learn some stuff, you could start with the first edition, which you can buy for almost nothing, right, online. And it's a great textbook. It's a great introduction to the field, and it'll tell you all about cognitive science, and you'll learn a lot. So I recommend that book. If you want a more historical book that was actually written a long time ago now, so it's called The Mind's New Science by Howard Gardner, and it's a more sort of breezy introduction, and so I think that's a fun book, and it gives you more an idea of the foundations of cognitive science, so how the field started. It's not going to give you the latest things. I think it may have been written in the 80s or 90s, right? So it's quite out of date, but it's still right about the foundations of cognitive science, kind of how it started, and it's a fun book, so you could read that. One other classic book, so I guess I will do three, is Steven Pinker's The Language Instinct, which talks about how children learn languages, and that's a really fun read. So those are some recommendations.
Thanks very
much. From dry textbooks to more popular, New York Times bestsellers. Yeah.
I'm being told that students coming in now refer to it as the late 1900s, when the 1980s and 90s. So
right.
Terrifying to get a little old. Well, I wanted to thank you so much for joining us today and sharing a little bit about the cognitive science program.
Hope you enjoyed the program, Chad, everyone.
If you have any questions about our LA&PS programs, be sure to visit our website to learn more.
And make sure to stay in touch with us for a chance to win a $100 gift card at the York Bookstore. The link to our website is in the description box below.
You can also send your questions to us, the LA&PS student recruitment team.
We'd love to hear from you, so send us an email at goyork@yorku.ca.
And we look forward to seeing you all on campus next year.
Bye.
Bye.